Faded. Cut to.
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
Day.
Night.
Action.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, happy today. You are listening to Restaurant Fiction. That's right. I hope you know that you're listening to it. I hope you know what Restaurant Fiction is about. And if you don't, well, before we even begin, there is only one really main way. I mean, I know you can listen to this in the car. You can listen to this while doing the dishes. You can just listen to it wherever you are. But the best way to experience Restaurant Fiction is by eating a delicious slice of the 1919 cheesecake. That's right. The 1919 cheesecake is only available to Southern California, actually LA County residents. So if you do live in LA County, well, DM them the 1919 cheesecake on Instagram. Get yourself a whole pie or a whole cake, I should say. Cut yourself a slice or just dip your whole entire hand into that cream cheesy goodness and listen to this amazing episode of Restaurant Fiction. And if you do not live in LA County, well then, I'm sorry, man. Get your butt over here, listen to the podcast. But before that, order yourself a 1919 cheesecake. DM them, direct message them on Instagram, which is the 1919 cheesecake. Now, this is Restaurant Fiction, the podcast that reviews every single fictional restaurant, bar, and club in TV and film. I am your host with the most, Monis Rose. And today we are talking to executive producer, co-showrunner of the TV show Queen of the South. It was on USA Network, Ben Lobato. Now, what are we reviewing? We are reviewing the fictional bar, the fictional tequila bar deep in NOLA, deep in New Orleans, Siete Gotas. Now, before we begin this awesome episode, you see, once upon a time, I was a cook, I was a chef. It just depends on who you ask, to a seafood joint. And there was a dishwasher that I worked with. Let's just call him Marcos, where you have to roll your R's. I really am actually shitty at rolling my R's. I only can say it with like Puerto Rico. Now, that was actually bad too. Anyway, Marcos, he worked with me. He was the dishwasher, and he would come late all of the time. And I'm not just talking about, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I'm talking about maybe like 2 hours well into the shift, where pretty much all of the other behind the line cooks and from chefs to, the mise en place crew would have to pick up the slack. And guess what? It was an honor to do so, because no one fucked with the Marcos. It's kind of like with the Big Lebowski. No one fucked with the Jesus. That's right. No one fucks with the Jesus. And the reason why is because when Marcos came, he came with his chest lifted, and he came with a couple of bottles of extra Nejo tequila and some Pacifico, and it was always a party when Marcos came. I loved working with Marcos. I mean, yes, he did do the dishes on time and all that, but that was not the point. You see, you respected the most important person in the entire kitchen, and that was Marcos. That was the dishwasher. And guess what? When Marcos was happy, the entire restaurant was happy. Oh, and plus, Marcos used to be a drug mule from the cartel, and he had about 4 homes in Los Angeles. And he was sending his kids to private elite colleges and high schools. Marcos was the man. Long live him. Now, without any further ado, here is our review of Siete Gotas, deep down in the Big Easy. And our question, answer, chat, fireside chat, our conversation, our in-depth look, deep dive into the heart, soul, and mind of the brilliant Ben Lobato. Go.
Without any further ado, guys, gals,
aliens, dinosaurs, big feet out there. When you're in New Orleans, people think of New Orleans as, oh, let's have a hurricane or let's have some kind of grenade on Bourbon Street. But no, no, no. In New Orleans, in the Vieux Carré, in this swampland, if you will, it's all about tequila. And not just any tequila, it is about Siete Gotas. Now, what is Siete Gotas? It is 7 drops. And, for those people that really do not know of their tequilas, there are different types. There's different types. You have your reposados, you have your añejos, but then you have your extra añejos, you have your aged añejos. And this Siete Gotas, this is smooth. This is smooth. This is stuff that you want to sip. You see, because in the bar, in this amazing New Orleans bar where they serve these delicious, it's almost like a churro meets beignet. It's like a chignet or whatever. It's this delicious food upstairs. You in the basement where all of the deals happen, where all the politics happen, you have these oak barrels, these like French oak and whiskey oak barrels that are just aging this fine elixir from the agave plant. And I'm not just talking about the highlands from Mexico, I'm also talking about the lowlands from Mexico. So you get these floral notes, but you also get those citrus flavors as well. And now, no disrespect to those people out there who want a Paloma or a margarita. That's all fine. You can still stay, but this is to sip. This is to sip because you are tasting the blood. You are tasting the blood, sweat, and tears of the craft of goodness that's just going to make or break you no matter what. And it just adds to the environment, it adds to the world, and it gives you that little edge, especially in New Orleans. All right, that's really all we got about Siete Gotas. It's just our little quick review. What did you think? I mean, there wasn't that much, but we feel that with Siete Gotas, with Queen of the South Bend, you brought not just a tequila, but you brought a very, very fine tequila. This was like quality, just because the cocaine that Teresa embeds and is a part of is also that Bolivian pure shit.
I mean, I think you nailed it. When we talked about this, what type of bar it is, it needs to be sophisticated, right? I mean, we don't even want limes to be behind the bar, right? There are no limes, there are no salt. This is not tequila that you mix. If you want that, go down the street, because this is not what we're doing here. This is pure gold. This is sipping elixir from the gods. That's the idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how well versed in tequila are you?
To be honest with you, I'm more of a mezcal guy. Yeah, but mezcal is not really one of those things that a lot of people are kind of into. Like tequila was kind of like, it was just a simpler sell, right? Because tequila moves in mass quantities, whereas mezcal is very much like it's sold in batches. Right. And like wine, every year, that's going to be a different flavor, depending on the rain, depending on what's in the soil, and depending on, how it's put together. So, I mean, for me, I'm much more into that. I'm actually, that one of my dreams actually is to have, a line of mezcal. That's something that I've explored. And, pre-COVID, that was one of the things that I was looking to get into, because I'm also an entrepreneur, and all of that was kind of shut down, with the COVID crisis. But, I'm looking to the future and hoping that I can revisit that as we come out of this time that we're in.
For those listening, mezcal, guys, for the guys and gals out there who are not familiar, it is more of a smokiness. You get more of a smokiness of this type of alcohol. Obviously it's throughout Mexico, but especially in the Oaxaca region, you would definitely have your mezcals. Yeah. Do you have any favorites right now?
Well, I would say favorites that people can actually purchase, I'll mention, because the other, kind of batch specialty mezcals that I get a hold of, like, you're not going to find them in the store. But one of my favorites that you can actually find in the store is Clase Azul and Monte Lobos. Those are two of my favorites. There's so many different, it's so varied. And I would tell people, like, the way to kind of one of the things that you can look at, like tequila is made from blue agave. That's what goes into tequila. Mezcal is made from hundreds of different agave plants, not just blue agave. And depending on what plant you choose, what region it's from, how much sunlight it got, whether there's honey into it, there's spices, sometimes there's a roasted chicken breast. There are all these things that go into it that really make it not just a craft form, but an art form that's been passed down for generations to really to families. This came from the Mayans, right? So that it's an indigenous artisanal craft that cannot be produced on a mass scale. And that's what makes every drop of it so valuable and so rich, because it's every sip is an adventure, every bottle is an adventure, every batch, and you cannot mass produce it. People have tried, I know there are brands out there that mass produce it, but really you're going to lose something that's very special, which is that mystery that you have every time you crack open a bottle of mezcal.
Wow. Man, you're right. Tequila is a little easier to sell, but it would have been amazing if Siete Gotas was more of a mezcal, if Teresa was embedding and being a producer of mezcal versus Reserva and extra añejo tequila.
Yeah. Well, that's again, it's all about the size of the shipments, because the concept was she's liquefying her cocaine, putting it into tequila bottles. Well, the difference is I can send you 10,000 tequila bottles, right, where each bottle is a liquefied kilo of cocaine, but I cannot send you 10,000 bottles of batch mezcal. So, that's therein lies the, even though like when we talked about it, it's like I would love to do mezcal. And of course, in my mind, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, and I'm going to introduce, my mezcal into the storyline, right? Like, those are all ideas but the reality is it didn't work for what we needed it to do in the show. We needed it to be tequila. So I think it worked out. I think it's really cool.
Gotcha. Speaking though of really quick Siete Gotas, like what does tequila and the bar say about the characters? What does it say about Teresa? What does it say about, her friends and her friends that betray her and her enemies?
Yeah, well, she's she came from the streets. She was a money changer on the streets of Culiacan, and Siete Gotas is actually a neighborhood, a barrio within Culiacan that she's from. That's the backstory, and that's why so it's a little bit of like when we designed the restaurant going into season 4, our production designer Ryan Palmer, we talked about this in terms of like she's a modern, sophisticated woman, right? So we needed to feel a little bit modern. We needed to have a little bit of that New Orleans old world patina, but then we need to make that, we also need to bring in that Mesoamerican flavor. So that's a lot of different things that we're trying to bring together in the fusion of the design of the set. And I think they did a really great job. You have some of that New Orleans patina, but then you also have a very sleek bar area with the lighting and whatnot. And then some of the colors that we're bringing in from Mexico. And I think it really all came together in a beautiful way.
What I love, because you're right, when someone thinks of New Orleans, they think of these old like Sazerac drinks. They think of like rum drinks. They don't think of tequila. So you're bringing something you're bringing to a city that already has an edge. You're just enhancing that.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and especially with season 4, how significant is Siete Gotas to Queen of the South?
Well, there's two different things. From a story perspective, it's the gangsters clubhouse, right? In all of these genres, you need a location to be their stronghold where you can have meetings, where things can happen behind the scenes. And then you also need that kind of legitimate front business. And so in terms of the story, that's what it serves, not unlike the Bada Bing and the Sopranos. For our character of Teresa Mendoza, it represents, in a way, her dipping her toe into a legitimate business, because aside from the fact that she was she was importing cocaine under the guise of tequila. The bar was actually a real bar. Like it really served tequila. It really was a bar. And so it was a legitimate business. And the beginning of her buying real estate and starting to move into this legitimate side of the business, as she talks about at the beginning of season 1, this idea that, a lot of American dynasties started as criminal enterprises. And she mentions the Kennedys. And she says, why not us? And so that's kind of the idea behind it, that this is her first entry into the legitimate business world.
Wow. Take me into, I guess, the writer's room really quick of Queen of South. Like, how often is, say, a scene about Siete Gotas pitched? Obviously, you're doing character, but you're getting with your writers, you're getting with also the behind the scenes crew, and it's like, yeah, how often is a scene at this bar pitched? Just because, either because of story or even because you just love it. You just love to put a scene there. You just love to put Teresa in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's anytime a scene is pitched, we start with the scene and then we say, where's the best place to put the scene, right? Because the bar was a set that we built on our stages, and it was really our only standing set for like season 4. The rest of it, we were out in the city. We were shooting in actual bars and clubs and in different places around the city. So just from a production standpoint, we have to spend a certain amount of time on our stages. So anytime there's a scene that's pitched, whether it's a meeting between Teresa, one of her allies, one of her enemies, question always comes up, is this a scene that we can do at the bar? And so we kind of always start there and work out. Are we going to murder somebody inside the bar? We try not to, but of course, that's part of the storyline. This is our legitimate business. Nothing, criminal happens here. No deaths. At the top of season 4, the catalyst for the season is Javier murdering the judge's nephew in the restroom after hours in the bar. And that kind of launches really the next 2 seasons. That's the catalyst for kind of like all the big moves that happen afterwards, which is great. So we have this place and there are rules that are laid down. This is not Mexico. We're not chopping off heads. We're not killing people. And very quickly it happens. And it kind of launches what, it's like I said, it's the catalyst for season 4 and into season 5.
And, you put it in, NOLA, this New Orleans, which has such a long history of all kinds of edge and vice, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of music, I know you dabble in the trumpet. Did you ever think, well, hey, maybe Siete Gotas needs like a trumpet or a jazz soundtrack to it? Did that ever come into play?
You know what? We talked about it, but it's interesting because we actually had some scenes with some jazz and we had bands and whatnot. But it's interesting because the show is kind of like it wants to be very modern. And sometimes when you have the jazz and the backgrounds of New Orleans, it can feel a little cliche unless you're doing something that's like a fusion, like maybe like if it's like a Latin jazz thing or something that's a little edgier. But those things are really hard to do. And then to have them be music in the background, it takes away from the actual scene. So then it becomes like a distraction. So usually what you end up doing, and this is kind of like all the shows that shoot in New Orleans, is you get some kind of classic jazz that plays like wallpaper music in the background. And it's just kind of there breathing, but it's not drawing attention to itself. That's kind of what you're looking for when you're telling these stories.
What are some of your fondest memories, specifically shooting in Siete Gotas?
In season 5, we have this scene in episode 503 when Boaz, after the judge kills Javier in retaliation for killing the nephew, he not only kills Javier, but kills his girlfriend, who is Boaz's ex-fiancée, who he calls the love of his life. After the judge murders them, Boaz wants to get retribution. He wants to take vengeance. And Teresa warns him off. She says, we cannot risk this. I made a truce. You cannot do this thing. And in season 3, Boaz goes missing. at the end of the teaser, he shows up with a box and places it on Teresa's desk in the office. And she opens it up and it's the judge's head. And it was when we pitched this, I remember pitching this and I said, and he says one thing, he takes off his hat and he says, "Lo sienta, jefa, I tried," which basically means that, "I'm sorry, I tried." So, he tried to follow her orders, but, he couldn't keep the wolf at bay. He took vengeance. And so literally, as they're still reacting to the fact that he just chopped off the judge's head and delivered it to her in a box, the police storm in to the bar. And they're there because the judge has been murdered. They found his headless body, and he's there to, find out what happened, get to the bottom of it, and threaten Teresa. And of course, she's claiming, "I don't know anything about this." And as they're having this conversation, the box with the head is literally right between them. And at a certain point, and so the tension is it's through the roof. And at a certain point, to punctuate his threat, he leans forward on her desk and with his hand brushes the box with the head aside as he's leaning in to threaten her, not knowing that literally the head is in the box right there. And so that's just one of those amazing moments. When we came to that, we were like, we have to do that scene. And so it was pitched and it pretty much landed exactly the way it was pitched.
Wow. The first time, anytime I see in TV and film, anytime I see anyone's head, I remember it. Like I remember, seeing in Seven. I don't know if you remember the movie Seven, but they delivered
the box. What's in
the box? Yeah, I always think of that, and then I even think of obviously it wasn't a human head, but it was a horse's head, in The Godfather. I'm like, oh man. Yeah, I just think of those. It's very those scenes are very memorable. Let's just say that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's better than a head wrapped in bubble wrap? You're right. It's just this is just.
Even on the development stage of a show, whether it be Queen of the South or whether it be any of your other shows, how often do you think, what does my character eat and drink? What does Teresa, even if we're not going to ever show it, what is she having with her, with her lover? What is she going to have by herself, collecting her thoughts? Yeah.
On our show, she doesn't eat. It's kind of like one of the running jokes behind the scenes. We have this character played by Hemke Madera, Pote, who his backstory is that he used to be a chef for one of the cartel bosses, and he got really good with the knives, and he graduated to being a sicario. So he's no longer a chef. He's actually, a hired gun now. But for fun, because he loves cooking, we have scenes with him cooking, which is really fun because, he's this big gregarious killer, but, he puts on an apron and he enjoys cooking in his spare time on his days off. But we had a couple of scenes where he was in the kitchen cooking, and Teresa would come in and say, "Teresa, try this, soup or whatever." And she would taste it. But then before they could actually sit down and eat, some crisis would occur and off they would go running. And so for 5 seasons, we would joke that we never saw them sitting down to eat together. And so in the series finale in season 5, the penultimate scene, the second to the last scene of the entire show, we actually have them all sitting down and having dinner. And it's a beautiful scene because it's the first time in the series that they're not looking over their shoulder. No one knows where they are. No one's coming to kill them. They let their hair down. They sit down and they have this meal together. And it's this beautiful moment. And it's a callback to something that happened 3 seasons prior, where they were in Malta, and Pote was experimenting making this widow soup that Teresa never got to have. And so now we come all the way full circle in season 5. They're having a meal, but Teresa cooked. And what did she make? She made the widow soup. And now Pote is going "This is delicious. I need to get the recipe." And it's this beautiful moment. But that was a setup that took more than 3 seasons to get there. And so it's just a beautiful moment. So that we do, even though that's not what the show's about, because the writers on the show are all foodies, it comes into play. And that was the biggest moment that it really came into play, that we did this callback from almost 4 seasons. So that was a beautiful moment.
Well, and even in the development process, like it is about character moments, even the stuff that doesn't make it into the TV show, you're still thinking about it. Like these are the important moments that even if that scene, almost like that Last Supper scene, never actually did get to air, you still had it in your head. You still had it like, okay, this is how the people are going to react over this meal. This is what even food means to them. This is in their blood.
That's right. Absolutely.
Awesome. And really quick with Pote, I don't know if you had a hand in it or it was on the marketing staff of the USA network, but I don't know, did you have a hand when he made the cooking video of a churro meets beignet?
Yeah, the chinettes. We came up with that, and then we started pitching ideas for like marketing, and then they put together that amazing video, which was so much fun. Yeah. And then it's another callback that we come back to in season 5 when they're now on the run, living under assumed names, and they join this like neighborhood like yard sale where people are bringing food, and he brings the chinettes. You know what I mean? And it's just like so much. So yeah, man. So like we really think about it, and it really in many ways defines that character of Pote, because it just, you take a guy who's used to who might be chopping off hands or killing people, but yet he's just like, he's got a sweet tooth. He likes to cook. And there's something about that really humanizes him in a way, because that's what we need to do, because he's one of the good guys. He's one of our guys. And so how do you do that? You make him relatable. And what's relatable? Everybody has to eat, and people like good food, and they appreciate joyful cooks. And that's who he is.
Thank you, Ben. We really enjoyed it. Actually, tell you the truth, we enjoyed it so much. We enjoyed this whole chat so much. We actually split it into 2 parts. This is part 1, and part 2 is going to be coming up soon in another week or 2. So be prepared for that. Why? Because it's just too goddamn good. There's too much awesome material. And if you loved part 1, then be sure to listen to part 2 coming soon. And then you could tell us which one you like better. Of course, with us, we pick no favorites. Part 1 is awesome. Part 2 is even more awesome. But then once again, part 1 is even more awesome. So it doesn't really matter. Nothing else does. Until next time, my name is Monis Rose. Keep it real, keep it fresh, and always keep on the flip side.
Cut to
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
day.
Night.